Thank you very much. Happy to be back here. I spoke last summer. I guess it was August at the last Doctors for Disaster Preparedness meeting. What a world has changed there. Just so you know, I was Inhofe's speechwriter and communication director for the Environment and Public Works Committee for almost 3 years on Capitol Hill. And we presided over, Senator Inhofe presided over from 2003 when he said that man-made climate fears would be the largest hoax perpetrated on mankind, to watching the entire thing collapse under him. He's still on the Environment and Public Works. He's now on the minority side because Barbara Boxer is the chairman. But it's a sea change in what he saw. And I want to thank you guys for being at the forefront. What you're about to see here, we're going to go through the entire collapse that's occurred since the last time I spoke to you, just 1 year ago. This is very appropriate. They're putting on the casket. I call it R.I.P. for man-made climate fears. Now, I know Chris Horner might be here. He might wince at that. Others might wince because there's a huge fight going on here. I'm not saying that it's all over. Go on, go about your day, forget about it. But this movement has been fatally wounded. But at the same time, it's got hundreds of billions of dollars that have been invested in this. Governments, politics, universities, foundations, the media, indoctrination of our children. And it's going to be around for a while, but it's going to have to be a deprogramming going on. It's going to be a slow cleaning out. This was last April 2009. UN scientist Will Alexander said, and he made a prediction, the whole climate change issue is about to fall apart. Heads will roll. Very prescient. That was in April. Little did he know what was about to happen. Here's what I've done at Climate Depot, which debuted actually in March or April of 2009. I like to liken it to if you were doing an anti-communist website and you started it in March 1989, just a few months later, the Berlin Wall falls in November of that year. I'd like to take credit, but a lot of it's just good timing. I mean, that's this movement has collapsed that fast. Here's some of the pictures. This is the Berlin Wall falling. This is representing ClimateGate, what's happened to global warming. Scientific freedom is now open again. A train wreck. The ClimateGate emails revealed a massive train wreck of global warming science. The Death Star, for you as you like Star Wars, that's what I'm warning about. The empire may strike back, but right now this is the condition of global warming, warmest science. The Loch Ness Monster. This was something, this was essentially some of these fearmongers like James Hansen, they were akin to the science level of this at this point where they're just going on wacky fears. And James Hansen, by the way, in the last year endorsed a book. This is NASA's scientist, James Hansen, endorsed a book calling for the destruction of dams in the United States and a deindustrialization of America. NASA's chief scientist has turned into a literal Luddite here against all technology. It's a very frightening scenario. This, of course, was probably the funniest as we had the record cold in Europe, in the Northeast, and in the Northern Hemisphere. Al Gore was ridiculed. I'll get to some of the ridicule and what's happened to Al Gore, too. It's kind of humorous. The fat lady is singing, "It's over." Now, how did this bubble burst? Let me get the microphone. Subprime science, subprime economics, subprime politics. It was doomed to fail. When I started in Senator Inhofe in 2006, we were looking at a situation where the global warming movement was foolish enough to have as their two key spokesmen the United Nations panel, which the American people overwhelmingly did not trust the UN, and Al Gore as their chief spokesman. Al Gore, regardless of whether you like or hate him, is a divisive American political figure involved in one of the closest races in U.S. history. You don't make a divisive figure the top of your spokesman for a movement. So between the UN and Al Gore, add to that the fear-mongering and wild computer model scenarios and the alarmism, you had a movement that was doomed to fail. This is where we are now. Clink the champagne glasses. I wish we could do a toast right now. The new UN chief, replacing Ivo de Boer. I don't believe we will ever have a final agreement on climate in my lifetime. This is good news. This is a direct result of people like Fred Singer, of people like Richard Lindzen, Roy Spencer, Will Alexander, people who've stood up for years and fought this. We are now at a gridlock in the United Nations. Cheers. Climate legislation, the official death in the United States of America. This is Mother Jones Magazine. Very upset about this. We'll get to the reasons why this has something to do with a man named Lindsey Graham. Environmental activists are now lamenting the end of the warming movement. The climate movement in the U.S. is fatally weak. See the toe tag there? Brad Johnson of Think Progress. All I can say is, we suck, climate movement. Wow, we suck. This is fun. By the way, this is the latest, greatest. Some of this I haven't even posted. This is June 11th. I'm giving you guys sneak peek into next week's news that's going to be appearing on Climate Depot. The whole world is laughing. This is Business Green. Just came out. UN climate talks are facing a cash flow fear. Stalled negotiations. Can they get any worse? The UN Secretariat does not have sufficient funds to host additional UN climate meetings before the big meeting in Cancun. The UN can't even get member nations to contribute to their con job charade anymore. This is the lowest point they've been, and we should be again. We should have passed out champagne glasses to everyone in the room. This is June 2nd. Subprime economics. This is very fun. Carbon bubble has burst. This is, again, breaking news. Look at the date, June 11th. Today's the 12th. Carbon bubble burst. Carbon permits in the U.S. Northeast Cap and Trade Program tumbled a record low price amid doubts Congress will create national emissions market. The permits are trading only 2 cents above the minimum allowable bid. Can you say bubble? Right after climate break broke last December, Canada's Globe and Mail. Don't let ClimateGate melt down your portfolio. Don't get stuck with investments tied to global warming. The smart financial investors saw this long ago, many months ago. This is going to be a huge collapse. Al Gore, by the way, was on the path to be the world's first carbon billionaire. Well, I don't think so now. Plus, with his divorce from Tipper, he's probably only going to be half the man he once was financially. So it's going to be ugly. So Al Gore, all his financial aspirations are down the tubes, literally in a matter of months. This is one of my favorites. New political expediency is skepticism. Lindsey Graham reversed himself just last week. This is June 9th. The science about global warming has changed. They've oversold stuff, quite frankly. I think they've been alarmist, and the science is in question. Lindsey Graham, the only reason he was involved in this is because he was mugging for the media. He was pandering to the media. He thought he had the hot issue of the day, the politically correct issue. His radar senses the movement is dead, collapsing. He is running. All his old environmental friends are terrified. What's most shocking is last October he penned a New York Times op-ed with John Kerry saying global warming is a very real, serious threat and the science is settled. Just months later, he reverses himself. That's how dramatic this has been. Even John McCain, you have to give him credit. He bailed out years ago, 2008. The only reason Lindsey Graham's relevant is because John McCain ran away when he sensed the movement was collapsing. McCain has undergone a major reversal on global warming. He sponsored 2 bills with Joe Lieberman, 2003, 2005. Former aides are mystified by what they see as a retreat on the issue. Gee, I don't know. Could it be that pandering to the media on global warming isn't popular anymore for John McCain, who's in a tough primary race? When you have John McCain and Lindsey Graham, the two of the most unprincipled when it comes to these kind of things, they just want to pander to the media, you know the movement is losing all popular support. And I'll show you some of the polling data too. This is my favorite. Cap and trade? War is peace? What? Harry Reid, majority leader, just yesterday, June 11th, we don't use the word cap and trade. That's something that's been deleted from my dictionary. Gee, deleted from your dictionary? This was the cause celebrated for 10 years, the global warming movement, cap and trade, carbon trading. And now the Democrat majority leader doesn't even use the phrase. That's the commissar vanishes. I know there were some references to this earlier. There's Joseph Stalin with one of his commissars. And, of course, the guy lost favor. And, hey, look at the next photo there. He's completely erased. That's what they're doing to cap and trade. Senator Kerry, I don't know what cap and trade means. He authored the bill, and he doesn't know what it means. It is a cartoon fantasy. This is hilarious what's happening. Global warming now is not about global warming. This is Debbie Stabenow. Climate change is not about temperatures going up. It's also about volatility. Did we say warming? We didn't say warming. Here's one of my favorites. We were all going to die. The were is my addition. James Lovelock, the green guru, the godfather of the greens, the man who put forth the Gaia hypothesis that the earth is a living, breathing organism, revered by the entire modern green movement. 2007, billions of us will die. Few breeding pairs of people will survive. We'll be in the Arctic. We're all going to die. What a difference a few years makes. 2010, James Lovelock now admits the obvious. Everybody might be wrong. Climate change may not happen as fast as we thought. We may have 1,000 years to sort it out. 1,000 years from we're all going to die to a few breeding pairs to now 1,000 years. I mean, this is their guru. This was the head guy. This is the UK's James Hansen here. And here he is reversing himself completely in a matter of 3 years. Where's the magic gone? This is the New York Times now pondering global warming's loss of credibility. They can't figure it out. Everything was in place. The scientists of the UN agreed. Al Gore was there. The media had their drum roll. What happened? They're still trying, though. Ted Turner, just last week, if we don't prepare for global warming, we'll be extinct. We have to make the changes. Oh, the end is fun to watch. Obama, passage of the climate bill, warns the failure to pass will smother our planet. Now, how will a bill that his own EPA admits won't even affect global CO2 levels, thus can't possibly affect global temperatures, how will not passing that have any impact on whether we smother the planet or not? Exactly. This is some of the creative artwork that people have sent me for Climate Depot. It's literally become a comedy. So what happened? How did we get to this point where we should be raising champagne glasses? This probably was the most well-financed modern political movement, most well-coordinated, most media-supported, university-supported, foundation-supported, elite-supported, politically correct, indoctrinated. How did we get to the point where we're all laughing about it? Scientific crap. I can't think of a picture that better explains what's happened. Especially the polar bear. The Canadian Inuit just last week came out and said the polar bears are very, very healthy. Their numbers are fine. There's now a green movement. The green movement is now saying, we need a new poster boy. Polar bears have been overused. We need something else. Why? Because the only threat they face are climate models that violate the basic principles of forecasting. I've always said if I was a polar bear and I saw a computer, I'd run like hell, because that's the greatest threat they face, is in the hard drive of the climate modelers predicting their doom. ClimateGate revealed the fraud, and this is one of my favorite quotes. Robert Austin, Princeton physicist. I view it as scientific fraud, pure and simple. That's ClimateGate. It exposed the upper echelon of the UN as producing the best science politics can manufacture. Plus, not only ClimateGate, these are all the sub-gates, and they go on and on. FOI, China, Himalayan, Pachari, Sterngate, Amazongate, Russiagate, Coral Reef Gate, Sea Level Gate. It just goes on and on. The multitude of scandals, the lack of peer-reviewed references, the references to press releases from environmental groups that the UN relied on. CBC's Rex Murphy, not always a global warming skeptic, unloads. ClimateGate pulled back the curtain on pettiness, turf protection, manipulation, and that's a great line. Science has gone to bed with advocacy, and both have had a very good time. Back to that champagne. They had too much champagne. They never should have been near that room. Okay. Even Newsweek. This was shocking. This was just May 28th. Uncertain science. The researchers have lost the public trust. A cascade of scandals. My favorite line, once celebrated climate researchers feeling like used car salesmen. Why? Because they were used car salesmen. When you have them the UN warning of tipping points, we have the UN on record in 1989 warning of a 10-year tipping point on global warming. 1989, that is a con job. You wouldn't buy a used car from someone telling you that kind of stuff. And even Newsweek, this is a senior staff writer at Newsweek. The IPCC's most quoted data and recommendations were taken straight out of unchecked activist brochures, newspaper articles. Newsweek is reporting this. And this cover was from 2007. This had an asterisk by it originally. They did a thing on the well-funded denial machine. I believe they went out to Fred Singer, and the ABC followed up on this. I took the asterisk off the photo. This is now the Newsweek cover as it should have appeared. This is interesting. Two faces of the UN scientist Trenbith. This is very important. Follow the dates. October 10th, 2009. UN scientist Trenberth, I believe Dr. Keene is from the same university, right? Says only poorly informed scientists disagree with the UN. And he appeals to authority. The IPCC has spoken. Quote, Trenberth, the only scientists who disagree with the IPCC are those who have not read it and are poorly informed. October 10th, keep it like that. But 4 days later, in the private ClimateGate emails, which weren't released until 6 weeks later, he said, quote, same man, Kevin Trenberth, 4 days after saying, if you don't agree, you're poorly informed. The fact we can't account for what is happening in the climate system makes any consideration of geoengineering quite hopeless. He admits that the UN is the false front is the con job, the used car salesman. Behind the scenes, he's expressing skepticism that would be very comfortable in this room. That's what was going on behind the scenes. And by the way, Kevin Trenberth's IPCC has spoken. Where have we heard that kind of phrase before? Oh, that's right. This was basically another photo I always use with the ClimateGate scandal. This pulled back the curtain, the men behind the curtain. It's only 52 UN scientists signed the summary for policymakers. Mike Holm, not any skeptic, came out recently and said the claim of thousands of UN scientists is bogus. I mean, so the scientists are coming out of the woodwork. Warmest establishment scientists that have been silent for years or defending the UN have now turned on it. That is a civil war going on in there. This is one of the other pictures I use. Final nail in the coffin. What I like to say is the global warming movement was dying and dead long before ClimateGate came along. We had last September, Professor Latif in Germany, the top UN scientist, warning that we may face decades, possibly face a decade or more of global cooling at a UN conference. And that went down like a lead balloon. We had Eric Berger, the Houston Chronicle, saying he thought global warming science was fait accompli, but now he's confused. Last September, the New York Times already writing articles as well, skeptical. The American people were already growing radically skeptical and around the world long before November 2009 when ClimateGate came. So what I like to say is ClimateGate, the movement was dead long before it came. All ClimateGate did was withhold the embalming fluid from the corpse. So now we can all see it rot and smell the stench. Back to Will Alexander, who I opened this with. He predicted heads will roll. He now says in May 19th, he's walking off into the sunset. I think he's younger than Fred Singer, but he's ready to, he's a man, 85 or 80, I can't remember how old he is, 84, 85. He now says there's no scientifically believable evidence, deliberate manipulation to suit political objectives. It's time for me to pack my bags and get on with my life. And Fred, please don't do that. We need you for the next decade and more to fight this. But Will Alexander has been fighting this in South Africa, and he is now saying he's calling it quits. He's declared the movement dead, and he's packed up his bags. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes from the ClimateGate. UN Chair Pachauri, Rajendra Pachauri, he ruled down stepping down if the UN from the UN Climate Panel, the IPCC, because he would be the one responsible for implementing the reforms. How can he walk away? Someone's got to implement these reforms, and I like to say it's like keeping Bernie Madoff around to institute financial reforms. That's how clueless. Everyone in this room should hope Rajendra Pachauri stays as long as possible with the IPCC because they have no chance of regaining credibility if that ever happens. Bizarro world. People will say, I was on ABC News recently with Dan Harris, but the investigations have looked into ClimateGate. It's all been vindicated. There's no scandal there. Lord Oxborough actually said, quote, we found the ClimateGate scientists absolutely squeaky clean. Does something sound wrong there? A UK investigation into ClimateGate found the scientists squeaky clean? Ah, that explains it. 1958 horror Dracula. That's Christopher Lee playing Dracula. Oops. Dracula is in charge of the blood bank. The chief ClimateGate investigator, Lord Oxborough, failed to disclose his environmental directorship. He's also the director of this environmental group, Globe. Keep in mind, this would be a huge issue if the tables were turned on this, but this they allowed him to go through, and it was no big deal. Warmist scientist Judith Curry. When I first read Lord Oxborough's report, I thought I was reading the executive summary and proceeded to look for the details. Well, there weren't any. It was a leaflet, the report that they're using all over the media. They vindicated those scientists. All right, this is tasteless, but I had to put it in. Answering nature's call. It's nice to have the light of day and stench of corruption coming from the upper echelon of the UN. We finally exposed it. We really should be rejoicing that people who have been perpetrating used car tactics are getting their careers urinated upon. And urinated is in brackets there. For shame, it's not just the United Nations. This is a real tragedy. Ralph Cicerone, the president of the National Academy of Science, has now turned the organization into a full-blown political advocacy group. $6 million federal study is now being used to lobby for the current global warming bill. The National Academy of Science. How many times have you gotten in a debate with the warmers? Well, the esteemed National Academy of Science all agrees on their tens of thousands of members. Wait a minute. It's 24 governing board members headed by Ralph Cicerone taking money from Congress to lobby for a bill. Do you really trust this science here? It is an outright scandal that Ralph Cicerone has not stepped down after this came out. This just came out in May 26. The Climate Con exposed. My daughters love this because they love Scooby-Doo. If you think about it, this was a classic Scooby-Doo episode from beginning to end. 1988, James Hansen goes to Congress, scares the hell out of everyone. The UN panels form the same year. We have Al Gore rise out of, for 1992, Earth in the Balance. Global warming becomes a terror movement, trying to scare you, needlessly scaring people, coming up with all kinds of scenarios. People, and it turns out, once it all settled, you pull the mask off just at the end of every Scooby-Doo episode, and it turns out the whole thing was a giant con. So the global warming movement and Scooby-Doo have much in common. How bad has it become? James Inhofe is featuring naked pictures of Al Gore on the Senate floor. That's how bad this has become. This was a speech this spring from the Weekly Standard. He had his blown up. This would have been unheard of when I started in the Senate in 2006. Everyone was worried about decorum and being senatorial. Well, this is not a time for decorum and senatorial. This is a time to kick them when they're down, and that's what we're doing right now. You can't let this rise again. It's a hydra. The people aren't taking it anymore. This is from the movie Network. We're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. Gore is now speaking not only here but on the West Coast and in Florida. Gore's speech is drawing 200 protesters. Boos and chants could be heard during his talk. The local media covering Gore's talks now are covering the protesters, not the usual pablum that Al Gore is dispensing. They're chanting liar, liar while he's in the podium. I'm all for civility when it's called for. I'm also for lack of civility, and that's what this is. This works. Now, some of the honors I've gotten since I spoke to you guys last August. Rolling Stone magazine named me one of the world's 17 climate killers, one of the planet's worst enemies, a central cell of the climate denial machine. This was a cover issue in Rolling Stone. In jail. Why would what's someone in jail for? This was Grist magazine. Climate Depot named one of the 5 criminals against humanity, against planet Earth itself. 5 agents of lethal delays. This is what's been going on. They don't like. I try to use humor, and when you use mockery and ridicule, they really gets under their skin. It gets worse. This is a warmest blogger just this morning posted. Morano sounds like one of those clowns who sits on the top of a dunk tank at the state fair and heckles people. Well, hey, those are pretty popular events, so I'm not upset with that. This is a Dutch scientist, Bert Vergen. Climate Depot's on the lunatic fringe, paranoia-based, someone who I would put on the lunatic fringe of the skeptic side. Well, gee, I'm always linking to Fred Singer, Willie Soon. I hope you guys aren't offended. You're with me there. Professor Andrew Watson, I was in a debate last December. You can read it right there. Feel the love. Newsweek magazine has said we're the most popular denial site, and I thank the mainstream media for ignoring ClimateGate. This helped it to fester across the country at rapid speed because it was a grassroots rebellion through tea parties, through town halls, and that is we have to thank the media. The media didn't step up and try to frame it. They tried to ignore it. When they do that, they allow others to frame the issue and to present the information, and that's what happened, and that's why they're sunk. This is Esquire magazine, shameless self-promotion since then. They did an April 2010 issue featuring entire global warming movement and ClimateGate. Fascinating thing that the media is waking up. So the question is, what's driving the warming movement? Here's all you need to know about the science. I know everyone's got charts and data and stats, but here, I'll simplify it for you. Ben Cardin, senator from Maryland, Global warming cap and trade, the most significant revenue generating proposal of our time. That's the money part. Here's the ideology. We must leave behind 10,000 years of civilization to deal with global warming. If we live at all, live locally. We have to get everywhere in walking or animal riding distance. How many people rode a yak in here today? This is the ideology. This is Grist Magazine, a major climate campaigner, Adam Sachs. This is what drives them. I talked to Friends of the Earth International at the Johannesburg Earth Summit in 2002, and they literally said that mankind only lives sustainably until 1900 on the planet. They wanted to erase the entire 20th century. They didn't consider it Earth-friendly. And the entire 20th century had the greatest advances, human advancements in terms of medicine, life expectancy. So how are they reacting? Scandals, peer-reviewed studies, swelling number of dissenters, public opinion. Back to Debbie Stabenow. Global warming creates volatility. I feel it when I'm flying. The storms are more volatile. Okay, who here had some turbulence on your flight? Anyone here on the flight in? You too have felt the hand of global warming. This is the level of science understanding in the United States Senate right now. The real motives, Gore, is to help bring about global governance, authentic global governance. Richard Lindzen had said, controlling carbon is a bureaucrat's dream. If you control carbon, you control life. Let's take a look. This is a German climate advisor. Creation of a CO2 budget for every person on the planet. September 6, Hans Joachim Schulenhuber, proposing the creation of a CO2 budget regardless of whether they live in Berlin and Beijing. And guess what? Americans have already exceeded his proposed budget by a factor of, I think we're at 100%, and he only wants us to have 25% of what we currently use. So this is a frightening development. How do you go about monitoring the carbon emissions of every man, woman, and child on the planet? You need global governance, which I just mentioned. You need an international body, either based in Brussels, run out of the UN, to start monitoring your train travel, your airline travel, your home energy bills, your car mileage. This is frightening stuff. This is happening in the UK. Personal carbon trading scheme. Every adult in the UK should be forced to use carbon ration cards. Think about this. This is a movement, again, where the government is going to monitor all your emissions. Now, keep in mind, we exhale CO2 from our mouth. That's why I think it was the Andrew Bolt in Australia said human beings have been declared toxic. We are now a toxic entity. This is, for the first time, they used to have the joke, you can't tax the air we breathe. Oh, yes, you can. You can tax the air we exhale. Anyone who exceeds their carbon budget in the UK would have to buy top-up credits. This is a bureaucrat, a bean counter's dream. Same time, there's a lust, I call it a lust for totalitarianism. New York Times, Tom Friedman, lauding China's eco-policies. This is great. One party can just impose politically difficult but critically important policies that need to move a society forward. If only we could have the benevolent dictators of China running the U.S. That's what Tom Friedman is saying here. That's a picture of Tiananmen Square. Nancy Pelosi, odd, she went to China, same thing. She told a group in China, every aspect of our lives must be subjected to an inventory to combat global warming. Nancy Pelosi, this was April of 2009. Think back a second. I just said we have a German climate advisor who wants a CO2 budget for every man, woman, and child on the planet, monitored by who? The UK is proposing carbon ration cards. Now we have Nancy Pelosi in China saying that we need to be subjected to an inventory of every aspect of our lives. Do you see a theme here? Is there a motive here beyond the science? This is just shows you that just in the tank. Global warming dead last, 20 out of 20. And by the way, that's been updated now in 2010. 34% blame humans for warming, the lowest finding yet. Gallup poll editor, Gore has failed. The public's just not that concerned. In fact, we get less and less concerned. This is the most shocking, and this was updated again this year. Of all the environmental issues, global warming not only dead last, but in the negative category. People couldn't scream loud enough that they could care less about global warming. Not only is it not the greatest issue, moral issue, greatest issue facing our planet, it's not even anywhere on it doesn't even rank as an environmental issue. My favorite one, more Americans believe in haunted houses than man-made global warming, 37 to 36%. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a hand to people like Fred Singer and Willie Soon right now and others who've spoken there. That is scientific progress. And by the way, this is last October. This is pre-ClimateGate. Remember I told you the corpse was dead before ClimateGate? This is where we stood in late October, a month before ClimateGate broke. So we have the history of the failed eco-alarms, the global cooling scare, overpopulation, chemical fears, resource scarcity, Amazon rainforest. And by the way, what's his name? The overpopulation guru, Paul Ehrlich, is still at it. He's still winning awards. A man who's probably the most scientifically discredited when it comes to anything relating to population. He's now admitted recently that he wishes he had taken more arithmetic before he made his wild predictions. The same man who called for forced sterilization agents in the 70s in our water and other things to try to control population. Are you getting the idea? Forced sterilization. Carbon budgets for everyone, complete inventory, lauding China's rule. Is there any theme here that people are missing? This is about human control. Climate control is not about the climate, it's about human control. Environmentalism isn't about the environment, it's about human control. So what will they switch to next? I know Willie Soon spent a lot of time on ocean acidification. When I was here last year, this is the blue man, I mentioned that the oxygen crisis was a candidate. Let's go through the candidates. Ocean acidification, oxygen crisis. This was the oxygen levels are dropping. Human activity has decreased them. The UK Green Party is promoting this, and they updated this last year. They're trying. They know global warming's failing. They're test marketing. They've got to find the next one. Plastics. Laurie David promoting plastic waste, more alarming than global warming in some ways. They're trying that. But the verdict may be in. Test marketing has revealed the next eco scare. Drum roll. Biodiversity crisis. Again, I'm giving you guys breaking news. Look at the date, June 9th. IPCC for Nature proposed. The biodiversity crisis, international body to monitor destruction of flora and fauna on equal footing with climate. The greatest issue of our generation, global warming, has now been replaced. Oh yes, the next eco scare may be here. That's Jack Nicholson from The Shining. Global warming officially thrown under the bus. Biodiversity, elite environmentalists, and the globalists appear to be preparing to dump it as their cause celeb. But there's a problem. Just like the IPCC panel, which they're modeling themselves after, the new UN biodiversity report has, quote, multiple errors in the first chapter alone. It really is IPCC-like. They got something right. They're modeling it after it. The sources aren't peer-reviewed. It's using estimations. They're found to be patently false. The UN's references are nearly all UN government reports or Environmental Institute reports. Their claims don't even match the cited sources. Does that sound familiar? This isn't the IPCC. This is the new biodiversity panel that they want to model after the IPCC. And from what I can tell, they got off to a fantastic start because they're just like the IPCC. This is climatequotes.com that's doing this analysis. They're having a third part coming out, and I'll probably have it posted up on Monday at Climate Depot. It's just tearing this report apart. It is absolute subprime science. It is a joke. And this is their new cause that they're going to be switching to. Astrology. Tarot cards. Man-made climate fear is now akin to ancient astrology. Whether the ice caps melt or expand, whatever happens, the AGW theorists claim it confirms their theory. A perfect example of pseudoscience like astrology. Frank Tipler. Keep in mind, Al Gore, during the record blizzard, DC had 3 blizzards, one right before Christmas, 2 in February back-to-back. The first one dumped almost 2.5 feet. Second one dumped almost 3 feet. The last one dumped only a foot, but it was like insane winds, was probably the worst of the 3. And that's all up and down the East Coast. Al Gore's response: record cold and snow are consistent with global warming. It's extreme weather. There's one problem. In Al Gore's book and movie in 2006, he never once predicted record cold and extreme snowstorms as part of his global warming predictions. So if it really was part of your predictions, why was it omitted from his film? Here's where it gets absurd. Everything's blamed on global warming. Global warming causing women to become hookers in Africa. Women in Malawi turning to prostitution because they can no longer make enough money from farming due to a changing climate. This is perverse. Now, this is just some news site. At least the UN's not involved in this. Thank God. The UN has a little dignity left. Oh no, climate change. The UN official pushes poor women to prostitution. The UN is getting involved now. The UN Food Population Fund. This is perversion. This is the perversion of science. It's telling people in the developing world that our SUVs, that our air conditioning are causing their wives and daughters to become hookers. This is not science. This is a perversion. And this is making the developing world look, I mean, I can't imagine that these people are buying any of this stuff, but this is what the UN thinks they can sell to the general public and the world. Barbara Boxer is warning of this congressional climate bill. Keep in mind, the bill doesn't even impact global CO2 levels or temperature, but if we don't pass it, we're going to have droughts, floods, fire, loss of species. President Obama has claimed the climate bill would stop global temperature increases of up to 5 degrees. On June 25th, 2009, a long-term benefit is we're leaving a planet that isn't 4 or 5 degrees hotter. I mean, imagine him making a statement. Imagine if George Bush had said something that wacky. The media would be all over it. Obama's own EPA. Here's Lisa Jackson. Will not impact world CO2 levels. All right, this is a cheap shot, but this is Obama at the G8 summit last summer. The picture is meaningless. I just like to put it up. It's humorous. Okay, controlling nature. Obama backed the historic breakthrough, agreed to keep the world's temperatures from rising no more than 2 degrees Celsius. In Copenhagen, very similar. This was my actual headline at Climate Depot on December 18th, 2009. We're saved! Politicians at UN announced they will control Earth's thermostat. Climate deal sets a cap on worldwide temperature increases of no more than 2 degrees. They did it! The scare has ended. UN leaders had a verbal non-binding agreement to agree that Earth isn't going to get warmer than 2 degrees. Why are we here today? The issue's done. That's a great picture showing them turning down the thermostat. Now, at the same time, Ugandans were blaming calamities, drought, and disease on angry gods. This is all African news source. Little do the Ugandans know their area is suffering the consequences of climate change. Those poor, ignorant Ugandans actually think that drought can be blamed on angry gods. But wait a minute, what's more plausible? The Ugandans blaming the drought on angry gods, or Western leaders thinking they can control Earth's thermostat? The answer is obvious. I think I mentioned this to you last year. The naked farm girls, shortly after Obama and the G8 leaders agreed, they went out naked in the field to plow parched fields in hopes of bringing embarrassing weather gods to bring badly needed rain. The question is, what's more likely, rain to come after naked farm girls plow the fields, or temperature decreases to come after world leaders sign have a verbal non-binding agreement? I would go with the naked farm girls every time. Richard Lindzen summed up the whole debate. Ordinary people see through man-made climate fears, but the educated are very vulnerable. Obama, my presidency will be the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal. Have we heard that before, though? How could people think they could control the weather? Well, the Salem witch trials, women suspected of being witches were accused of changing the weather. Remember, it was during the Little Ice Age, but actually that doesn't exist anymore according to people like Michael Mann and others. But that's why the crop failure, they thought the witchcraft was causing it, so they were taken care of. Have we really advanced? This is the ancient Aztecs. In 1450, they encouraged people to sacrifice blood to the gods and end severe drought. They sacrificed thousands of people in a few weeks, just as scientific as the G8 leaders in the UN conference agreeing to limit the Earth's temperature to 2 degrees. In fact, the professor who invented the 2-degree target admitted it was all just essentially nonsense about 3 months ago. The whole movement is just a political PR movement, this idea that we could have a certain level of CO2 in the atmosphere to keep it at 2 degrees, as though it's a big giant thermostat you can control. And again, just going through this, it is a moral issue. People can't cook. The global warming inspired ban in Chad and Africa. This is their environmental minister, no doubt schooled in UN science. Cooking is, of course, a fundamental necessity. On the other hand, with climate change, every citizen must protect his environment. People at barely a subsistence level of living are being impacted by silly UN global warming regulations. Poor Kenyans rebelling as wealthy white Europeans, carbon-friendly policies. Let's buy local, and they don't export food from Kenya, and affecting people of color in Africa. India, my favorite quote, morally wrong for us to reduce emissions when 40% of Indians do not have access to electricity. I think that says it. Why would they sign on to a UN climate energy rationing treaty? This is a Ugandan activist telling Africans they can't have electricity is immoral. Gore uses more electricity in a week than 28 million Ugandans together use in a year. I interviewed a activist, actually Chris Horner was with me in South Africa, Johannesburg. She was like a 19-year-old college student from Minnesota. I called her a green missionary. She was going around the developing world in Africa telling them that they were living correctly, that they were doing it right without running water, without electricity, that the American way of life, that emulating Western prosperity was, in her words, bullshit. And that's exactly the mentality you find with a lot of these green activists. To the point where one cartoonist, I love this cartoon, I think it really says a lot. Al Gore looking at a dying African baby in the desert, your carbon light lifestyle is an inspiration. Because when Friends of the Earth International tell you that we live sustainably only until 1900, and the 20th century was not, they're basically condemning people to a nasty, brutish, and short life. Carbon-based economies are one of the greatest liberators of mankind in the history of our planet. And their carbon-based energies allowed unprecedented, everything from modern dentistry to defibrillators to medicine, lowering child infant mortality, and extending life expectancy. And the final thing, if the Earth truly was facing a climate crisis and we had to rely on Congress and the UN to save us, we would truly all be doomed. Never underestimate the ability of Congress to offer costly non-solutions to problems that don't even exist. Anyway, so with that, that's my update from last year, and there was a lot to cover. But as we go forward right now, we got this UN biodiversity panel forming, modeled after the IPCC. It looks like the oxygen scare has fallen to the wayside, the plastic scare. Ocean acidification will go forward, but that's not going to capture the imagination of school children and Hollywood. It's too technical. So I think what they're going to do with the biodiversity, they can cover everything. They're going to have animal extinctions and trees. They can target this at kids. They're going to include climate as a component in that, but climate is sort of going to dissolve into this big, basically everything. The biodiversity is going to cover everything. They can justify just about any issue. And they're going to be seeking funding. They're going to be seeking all kinds of attention for this. It's launching this year. This is actually the UN's year of biodiversity. So we've already got it. I mean, it looks like that is the next eco scare. The problem is, I don't think global warming is dead yet. But if the U.S. Congress fails to pass a cap and trade bill the next 2 months, or before August recess, a month and a half, and it looks like the midterm elections, the Democrats are going to lose a lot of seats. Global warming cap and trade in the U.S. could be in for a long, long winter before it's even contemplated again. It could be 2018 or something, before 2016 at the earliest, before it's even brought up again. And of course, you saw where the new UN chief is saying there's no deal in the in the UN level, no international treaty, and they can't even find the funding from member nations to hold these little tiny pissant meetings that they like to have before the big meeting. I mean, it is just in tatters. And I want to say the phrase I said earlier: we need to kick them when they're up, and we need to kick them when they're down. We can't let this monster rise again. We got to keep it down. So, with that, I would be happy to take questions. I think we have if anyone has questions. Okay, so I can step over to the microphone there. There's a lot I didn't cover, so if you have any questions, I couldn't possibly put it all in. Most of that ClimateGate stuff and most of those developments, I just picked the last 2 weeks in news. That's how overwhelming it is. I can't even keep up with it. So I just figure I'll go back about 10 days and put in the latest stuff, because if I went back 6 months, I'd be here for 18 hours. So go ahead, yes.
In California, we have Carly Fiorina opposing Barbara Boxer. How can we support the elimination of Boxer?
Very good. Well, I mean, Carly Fiorina has been saying great things. She's been mocking Barbara Boxer's claim that CO2, carbon dioxide emissions, are going to be the main cause of conflict in the world in the coming years. I mean, using the national security threat that there's going to be more floods and droughts. It is scientifically laughable. Fiorina is going after her correctly right now. Barbara Boxer is on the run. This is the most threatened she's ever been. It's hard to say. I think she's doing a great job on the global warming stuff. She's mocking and ridiculing her, which is the first thing I'd recommend. You cannot take this on a serious level when you're on the politics level. So I think she's doing a pretty good job. We'll see where this goes. Boxer's in real trouble. So what's that? Send in. Oh, of course, yeah, yeah. You can also support it. I don't want to get involved in that aspect of it, but yes, and you can send them. Yes, Jay, how's it going?
I think you're obviously correct that we've got 2 months to defeat cap and trade, but many of us didn't think that Obama would be able to force health care through. He was pretty darn clever in those last weeks, and he did it. So obviously there is still a chance that he could use the same tactics and win.
Yes.
What are your marching orders to us? I mean, we're a small group. We have 2 months, and whatever we can do, we should be doing. Specifically, what would you tell us to tell our friends and colleagues that might be effective in helping defeat it in these 2 months we have left?
Well, the biggest thing would be there's coming up on summer here, and there might be a recess over 4th of July and other things. The town hall meetings last year were probably, more so than tea parties, the single biggest factor in scaring the hell out of politicians who voted for the climate bill. We have multiple examples of congressmen who voted for the climate bill in end of June who went home to their districts and were booed, jeered, ridiculed, and laughed at when they tried to claim there was a consensus. Again, pre-ClimateGate. We had the chairman of the House Agricultural Committee, Chairman Peterson, now reversed himself, said he would not vote for the climate bill again. He faced such hell back in his home district. You got to get them back in their districts. Look for the town halls. Look for any forum you can have with these politicians. Anything face-to-face, any kind of confrontation. Make global warming the most unpleasant experience they could have, any kind of support for this. And I wouldn't worry too much about the healthcare thing. Healthcare, and I've said that. I thought the climate bill was dead. Then after healthcare, I said they can pretty much pass anything they want if they're going to use those tactics. The problem is they're all spent out. And when you have people like Al Franken of Minnesota, who's now bailed on the climate bill, says he won't support it. It's just that there's too much fatigue. We're too late in a midterm election. And the fact that Lindsey Graham bailed on him, there's no bipartisan support. I think we're safe this year. Of course, that doesn't leave, you still have the option of a BP oil bill and some kind of climate amendment slipping in there. You also have the EPA regulations. I think Chris Horner will probably talk about that more tonight. So it's never done, but I think we're going to survive this between now and August recess. Go ahead.
Is there any work being done to find the cost to the United States of this fraud? I think of ethanol.
Well,
ethanol being one. I mean, it's hundreds or billions.
Well, there's a researcher, Joanna Nova, who did an estimation on just what the U.S. government has spent on climate research and climate-related regulations. It was something like $78 billion. $78 billion. And on the international level, it's hundreds of billions have been spent. In terms of, it's hard to always estimate how much lost economy and regulations have cost based on the climate fears. We can handle the expense. The real sad part is the developing world. People who are getting charcoal taken away, people who are getting denied dams and hydroelectric plants, lunatics like James Cameron, the director of Avatar, who goes in and stops development and then flies home to his multiple mansions and pats himself on the back because he's stopping bringing running water and electricity to people at a barely a subsistence level. People living in huts made of dung. Hollywood celebrities go and praise them and stop development, stop a dam because they're worried about the local environmental impact. So we can handle the cost. I think the real issue is the developing world. And they're the ones that are facing life and death on this.
And in addition to that, are there any suggestions you have about in the future for the next case like this, where the whole country is swept up in something that's a fraud?
I mean, it's tough. Global warming started in '88, went through the '90s, and never really caught. If you go back to the '90s, the Amazon rainforest was actually the big scare of the moment. And I actually did a documentary that came out in 2000 on that. The New York Times in 2009 now admits that the rainforest scare was overblown. They said maybe it wasn't such an urgent problem after all. For every acre of rainforest cut, 50 are growing back. Why is that? Because people don't want to live in a hot, swampy jungle. Oh, jungle's not politically correct. The rainforest. But they're leaving, and what's happening is all these jungles, whether it's slash and burn farming or the settlements, they're all reverting to nature. This is the New York Times major article from January 2009. The issue's done, put to rest. Sting's rainforest concerts are a thing of the past. No one even talks about the Amazon and rainforest, yet that was the big one in the 90s. So global warming really had a couple things. The UN really ramped it up in 2007. The Nobel Prize helped, but I think Hurricane Katrina, probably more than any other thing, really gave fire to the UN and Al Gore and the media, and I think that's what put it really intense. And once it got that intense fire, the ball burns brightest right before it burns out. That's what happened. It could have lingered on for another decade if you didn't have Gore's film and the Oscar and the Nobel and Hurricane Katrina to make it happen. And people like James Hansen that constantly tweak the data and torture it till it confesses, just declare he's declaring every year the hottest year. And then when we had a cool year, he'd say, oh, who argues over hundredths of a degree? Why are people making such a big deal about that? Well, Mr. Hansen, you do all the time. And he's doing that again now. He's saying the last 12 months were the hottest. If you look back at the NASA data set, it seems like every few years, the past is getting cooler and cooler to show the warmth is present. It's amazing. And other data sets are showing the same thing. They just keep tweaking the data quietly and silently and just making it all cooler to show this unprecedented warmth. So the answer to the question is, how do you fight a future scare? I think we have a great model now. I mean, when I came to Inhofe in 2006, we decided to be in your face. I just think you've got to be aggressive, and you got to use mockery, ridicule, and you got to throw the science right at them. You got to overwhelm them with the facts and keep at them. I mean, when Inhofe gave his first speech, it was September 2006. It was after Al Gore had won. I don't know if he had won the Oscar yet, but Al Gore's film had just come out. The media was all done. It was all, the debate was settled. Inhofe went on the floor. The Drudge Report picked up the speech text. The phone in our Senate office would ring. I called in our staff director, and I said, look, come here, sit down, because I had my direct phone number on the press release. The phone was ringing every few minutes. I'd pick up the phone. Every single call was someone, thank you, finally someone speaking up. Thank the senator, this is fantastic. We knew this was a hoax. We knew it. Thank you, Senator. It went on for days. We got hundreds and hundreds of emails, up to thousands, just kept pouring in, the phone calls ringing. People were just pent up. We finally gave them a forum, and then we tried to use the Senate office to start gathering the names of scientists from around the world, because at one point they were saying, the head of the UN was saying, these are flat earth society scientists, there's less than a dozen skeptics in the world, and the media was picking up on that as though that was a true statement. And so that's what we went right after, the numbers game, and that's one way we crushed it. But again, the seeds were already there. The UN, no one trusted it. It was a politically corrupt used car salesman organization, and Al Gore was a divisive figure, so they were doomed to fail. It's just that they thought they were going to win for a few. That's what makes it so sweet. They actually thought that they had it done and that the skeptics were defeated and the denialists were beaten, and we ended up crushing them, at least at the moment. And keep in mind, we could still lose. So I hate to look at it. It's not really a win-loss thing, but it is a win-loss thing when you look at it as this is absolute used car salesman trying to con you. If you can defeat the used car salesman at his game, that's a victory. So go ahead. Yeah.
I guess this is a related question. Listening to you, I was struck by the shamelessness of these people.
Like James Lovelock. We're all going to die, billions of us, and then 3 years later, we may have 1,000 years to sort it out.
Right. And the last speaker talked about how these very same people were talking about global cooling, then they jumped to global warming.
If you go I have a whole fact sheet at that at Climate Depot. Lists it all the same scientists who are supporting it.
And now before the global warming is really completely killed, they're already jumping to biodiversity.
Yes.
So my question is, is there a way to stop them completely, or at least the same individuals?
No, because it's actually at its heart, it's a totalitarian impulse. I mean, this is about human control. And if you go back to the 1970s, it's the same. There's actually, I call it plug and play. I mean, it's exact. The global cooling scare had the same solution: more government control, UN, international bureaucrats controlling economic activity. It's the same solution regardless of the eco scare. And that's the same thing with the UN Biodiversity Panel. I direct solutions identical to the climate thing. It doesn't matter. They just plug in the latest scare of the moment. It's very hard. You just have to discredit them, and hopefully the public will lose interest, but you're not going to stop them from doing it. They're too well funded and organized.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I want to thank you and all the other speakers this morning for excellent talks and replenishing my ammunition to go to my congressman and my senator to kill this cap and trade bill. I also want to meet with you to get some training on how to do it. You don't live that far from me.
Okay.
I'd like to meet with you and show you. There's also a parallel thing that I've experienced all my life about nuclear energy. Nuclear energy has also been killed by bad science. I want to talk about that tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, well, actually, the Freakonomics in the New York Times of nuclear energy actually said if we did have a global warming problem, we should blame Jane Fonda because she single-handedly in her movie, The China Syndrome, stopped nuclear plants in the United States. So, Yeah, and by the way, when Lindsey Graham gets the memo that belief in global warming fears is no longer expedient, the message is being heard loud and clear on Capitol Hill. So you don't have to worry about them getting the message. They have gotten the message. And John McCain, of course, bailed out years ago, but that's more because he ran for president, and now he's running in a primary. But believe me, he would be at the forefront if those two factors weren't there. Although he might be bailing. He would be bailing now because of ClimateGate. But I will give him credit for that, but he was shamelessly, yes, yeah. I mean, other than the global warming, he had a great energy policy, but John McCain's shameless pandering to global warming all those years. In fact, he was converted by a Greenpeace activist, I think, during the 2000 election. It was just, really horrible. Yes.
Yeah, just your opinion on whether it would be effective. I just wonder, would it make sense to establish an organization or whatever, with a legal organization, to bring class action suits? I know there are laws for, to bring class action suits and demand payment against all these charlatans personally, so that, I think if you could win one or two of those, you might just really cap a lot
I
of
don't
the
know.
other
I mean, Chris Horner,
continuance.
the legal expert here on climate, he might be able to answer that. But in terms of, legally right now, the big battle will be in the courts with the EPA trying to declare CO2 a pollutant. But yeah, it's certainly a fascinating idea, the class action suit. Anything else? Sir? All right. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy and emit happily.